Chapters 10, 11, and 12 of Shri Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10. Thus the childhood of Krishna was full of what were considered wonderful miracles by his family and the populace, but which to the Lord of the universe were but divinely natural. The strength of the baby hands was colossal, the beauty of the baby face was entrancing. His flesh gave forth a luster and radiance that filled a darkened room with glory. The wisdom that peered from his wondrous eyes was full of loving mystery, and the touch of his breath brought to the heart a love that was ecstasy. O babe that came to a desert of life to make it a garden of lilies and roses, O babe that brought to a weakened heart the love that conquered the world by its might. O babe that came with a light on thy brow that filled the eye like the glow of the sun, and brought on thy breath the promise of bliss which came to all those who breathed where thou dwelt. All these thou wert, yet a helpless babe in the arms of those who reared thee thou lay. And naughty thou wert, and full of mischief too, stealing the golden butter that stood in shining rows, the pride of the dairy maids, the gopis, and feeding the same to the saucy monkeys that crowded around thee to help thee in thy pranks. O wonder of love and might, incomprehensible one, thou omnipotence, who the all-pervading energy of all art, and yet with eyes aslant, didst play the child to suit thine only sweet fancy, and in the midst of men didst come to teach men love, and save the world that was steeped in sin. Thou who wert Lord of the Lords of Yoga, this thy Yoga power did startle the world when in it thou wert as a child. On one occasion the child became impatient and fretful because the mother failed to suckle him at his cry, and running amidst the pots and chums where she had been working the butter, he cast them down to the earth, breaking them into pieces, and dividing the sweet butter with the pets that followed the child wherever he went. The mother, on being told of his mischief, sought to punish him by tying him with a cord to the husking stand that stood near by. The cord lacked 2 inches in its reach to the bench. More cord she sought, and fastening it end to end, found still the 2 inches missing. Cord after cord she added thereto, but she could not make the 2 ends reach. Amazed and startled, she gazed at the child, her hair disheveled, her face flushed with excitement, a great fear looking from her eye. For what was this miracle that prevented her from spanning the reach of 2 inches? The child, on seeing the troubled face of his mother, allowed himself to be fastened, and thus in disgrace he stood for a time till 2 trees in the distance attracted his eye, and walking away in the reach of the cords and drawing the husking stand behind him, he stood between 2 huge Arjuna trees, and casting the cord about the trees, he tore them up by the roots. Down they came with a crash to the ground, carrying with them all that was in their way. And lo, from the trees 2 fiery spirits appeared, and saluting the child they prayed, and disappeared in a cloud of light. For list, in the days of yore, when the saint Narada walked the earth, he passed the stream where maiden youth made merry in the waves. At the passing by of the saint, the youths failed to salute him, but instead in bold arrogance laughed and called unto him, and reverence had they none. In the heart of the saint a prayer arose, that the youths who knew not respect towards the saints that walked on earth to make men holy should be reborn as trees, yet as trees to remember their past offense and dwell on the folly thereof. But the saint also prayed that when he who was God came on earth, he would remember the trees and sanctify and free them by his love touch. So when the babe's eye spied the trees, he uprooted them both to make good that prayer, and by his touch the souls of the youths into high heavens did rise, while he, the child, the great deliverer of all souls that are born, looked on and smiled, and the populace wondered at the fall of the trees, and marveled how the child had been saved from death as they crashed down beside him. Blinded ones who know not love in its mightiness and nearness. Again one day little Krishna, romping with the playfulness of his youth years, heard the weak voice of a woman begging to sell her wares or fruits. Lean were her hands and shrunken her features, and her clothes were poor and thin because of the length of time they had been worn. Faint and quivering the voice reached the ear of Krishna. With a glance of love that warmed her heart, he bounded to her side, asking for fruits and giving her paddy instead, when lo, at the touch of his hand the face of the woman beamed with the light of beauty. Her voice as with joy rang out, and her basket was heavy and filled with gems that blazed and glittered in the noonday sun. And laughing the child ran to his playmates and pets and divided the fruits with them all. Chapter 11. Now came a time when the oldest and wisest of the populace of the kingdom where Krishna was reared bethought it best to take the wonderful child from the place where men marveled at the wonder of him and came from far to look on his face. And anxiety filled the hearts of the people who loved him best for his safety, as calamity upon calamity came nigh him, and though no harm as yet did betide him, yet was it only a miracle that saved him from the child-killer Putana. And again only the hand of Vishnu had rescued him from the fierce whirling dust storm, and the turning of the cart at his side, and last the two trees that crashed at his feet, yet touched not a hair of his beautiful head. Yes, best by far it was to take away the child. So reasoned the elders, and Nanda approved, and forth they went with attendants and friends and all who lived in Gokula. And a caravan they formed, the cowherds driving the cows and calves before them, and carts bearing the women and children, and the men beating the drums to the voices of the women that broke forth in glad hopefulness. And bright was the sky that spanned their heads, and rich the forest through which they passed, and life-giving the sun was, and refreshing the winds were that greeted them on the way to Brindaban. And in the early days of their sojourn in these rich forest depths, tents they erected, which soon were overspread with creepers that abounded in that place, and birds came near and nested in the tendrils, and the wild hare and shy deer nearer and nearer their new friends came, till all tamed they would feed from the hands of the gopis, and played with the children, and thus in peace and serenity they lived in Brindaban. Brindaban, the land of love and holiness, the land where Krishna laughed and played, the land that the center became of all spirituality because of his sojourn there. An ordinary boy, he walked with the boys, as tender of cows and calves, and in a little while the city of Brindaban thrived, and a city of plenty it was to all who therein lived. But as time went on, even here the dread calamities seemed to follow the boy Krishna, for an asura sent by Kamsa assumed the form of a calf, and strayed among the calves, hoping thus to elude the eye of the child and perhaps take him unawares. But hardly had he mixed with the herds when Krishna pointed him out, and strode to where the calf was grazing. With easy grace he lifted him by the hind legs and twirled him high in the air till lifeless the asura was. Then midst the shouts of the cowherd boys and companions he lifted his face to the skies, which opened wide to his smiling eye. Chapter 12. In the morn of summer, early, even before the sun yet bathed the world with its golden warmth, The companions of Krishna, aroused from their slumber by the lowing of the cows, would gather about the house of Nanda and wait for Krishna to come from his bed and go with them to the forest to tend the cows, and while away the sweet hours of long summer days with sporting and tales and long rambles together. And oft as they waited about the gates of the palace, Yasoda would speak to the waiting boys. Ye children, my Krishna has not yet opened his eyes to the light of the day. His sleep is sound, nor will I wake him till of his own will he comes from his bed. So go with the cows and leave him to me. But the boys would not stir, but would still wait his coming. But the joy left their eyes because of their longing to look at the boy who was love. And loud were the cries that came from the boys as they saw him approaching, and then come in their midst and be with the boys as a boy would be. And oft Yasoda, the mother who reared him, would take him aside and remonstrate with him thus: O my Krishna, my son, why wilt thou thus spend thy time with the cows and the cowherds? A son of the king art thou, O my boy, and thy place is not there with the cows in the pastures. Many servants have we to see to the herds. Come, take thou thy flute, bedeck thyself with garments and ornaments, as it doth behoove my son and a prince. Then Krishna, twining his arms round the neck of his mother, with a world of glowing love in his visage, would gaze far away into the heart of his people and reply to her who knew him as son: O mother beloved, well it is for me, a son of a king, with the people to be. Though of the palace, yet is my place there where the people call unto me. Tender am I of the flock, O my mother, and to them I must go. With them must I be, to teach them myself and the power of love. Even now must I go to the calling hearts, who madly seek me, and will not be satisfied till again me they see. And Yasoda, the mother, in amazement gazed on the face of her son, and understood not his prattle that such wisdom held. But the tears of fond pride rose to her eyes, as she saw the love that came from the boy, and enveloped him as a soft cloud of light. And she kissed her son, seeing but in him a merry little child, bounding and throbbing with victorious health. Onward he ran to greet his companions, who were satisfied now as they beheld his coming, and laughing the group went to the forest. They played, burying their bare feet in the mosses, rolling in the sweet grass, clapping their hands in the fullness of joy, and shouting in very ecstasy of being. Never saw they in him the son of a king. They knew him but as a cowherd boy, who like them tended the cows in pastures and forests. End of chapter 12.